Hello and welcome. Get ready for a thrilling and emotional story about Amanda and David. Secrets, heartbreak, and unexpected twists unfold in this tale that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to catch more gripping stories. The rain had just ended in Lagos, leaving the streets glistening with broken reflections of neon lights and passing headlights. The air was heavy, soaked in the smell of wet asphalt and lingering smoke from roadside suya stands. Beneath the high walls of Banana Island, the city's wealthy retreated into their glass mansions, while just beyond those walls, life was harder, darker, raw. Amanda Williams, tall, polished, with eyes that rarely betrayed emotion, stood on the balcony of her penthouse. From there, she could see the faint outlines of the slums across the lagoon, small lanterns flickering in the distance. She never let herself stare for too long. It reminded her too much of where she came from. And she hated reminders. Tonight was different. She felt restless, like something inside her chest was shifting against her will. The house was silent except for the faint hum of the air conditioner and the ticking of her father's old grandfather clock in the hallway. Her father, God rest his soul, had built everything she now owned, the empire that bore their name. And Amanda had sworn to protect it, no matter what. Her thoughts were interrupted by her fiancé, Jonathan Cole. He was handsome in a sharp, deliberate way, his suits tailored, his smile practiced, the kind of man who fit perfectly in Amanda's world of polished marble floors and boardroom glass walls. But Amanda's eyes softened only when she thought of her past. Years ago, before she wore diamonds and hosted charity galas, she had crossed paths with someone else. Someone who had nothing. A man with dust on his shoes and hope in his eyes. His name was David. She had met him on a humid evening when her car broke down near Oberland. He had been sweeping the street outside a mechanic's shed, his hands rough, his shirt torn at the sleeves. She remembered the way he looked at her, not with envy, not with greed, but with a quiet admiration, as though she were human, not untouchable. Amanda had mocked him that night. Out of pride, out of anger at her own helplessness, she had thrown words at him like stones. "Don't stare at me like that. You'll never know what it means to live in my world." She remembered his silence, the way he had looked down and continued sweeping. And then, quietly, "Maybe, but I know what it means to live with nothing. Sometimes that teaches more than wealth ever could." She had laughed, rolled her eyes, dismissed him. But she never forgot. Now, years later, standing on her balcony, Amanda pressed her palm against her abdomen. A secret she carried, heavier than her empire, heavier than her father's legacy. Because the child growing inside her did not belong to Jonathan. It belonged to David. And the world, her world, could never know. Morning came with the smell of rain still hanging in the city. Amanda dressed herself in silence, choosing a pale silk blouse and pearl earrings, armor for the day ahead. The staff moved quietly in the halls, but she could feel their eyes follow her as she passed, as if they sensed something unsettled within her. Downstairs, Jonathan was already waiting, sipping espresso, scrolling through his tablet. He looked up with that practiced grin. "You're glowing," he said, not quite looking into her eyes. Amanda forced a small smile. Long day ahead. In truth, she felt the glow he saw, but it wasn't his doing. She had woken at dawn with her hand resting on her stomach, whispering words she hadn't spoken aloud to anyone. Words of hope, words of fear. The child was a quiet miracle she never thought she'd want. Yet it had arrived, unplanned, undeniable. And it carried a past she had buried. Jonathan tapped his watch. "Board meeting in an hour. Your father's old partners are restless. They want assurances that the Williams legacy is stable." Her jaw tightened. Stable. If only they knew the storm gathering beneath her skin. The drive into Victoria Island was tense, the city buzzing with restless energy. Danfo buses leaned into traffic, vendors slapped sachets of water against windows, street preachers shouted at commuters trapped in jams. Amanda looked out the tinted glass of her car, her heart tightening when she saw a man sweeping the roadside with a hand broom. The motion, the bent back, the slow rhythm, brought David rushing back into her mind. She had not seen him in years. After that first night, he had appeared again, at a charity kitchen where she had gone in disguise with a friend from church. He had been serving food, his shirt damp with sweat, but his smile unbroken. They had spoken, brief conversations that lingered long after. And then, one reckless night, she had allowed herself to cross the line she swore she never would. Now, the result of that night grew inside her. At the office, marble floors echoed beneath her heels. The boardroom smelled faintly of cologne and polished wood. Amanda stood at the head of the table, her voice steady, her father's fire flowing through her words as she promised growth, expansion, control. They nodded, scribbled notes, whispered approval. But in the back of her mind, she heard David's voice from years ago. Sometimes nothing teaches more than wealth ever could. When the meeting ended, Jonathan leaned close. Dinner tonight. My parents want to finalize the wedding plans. Amanda's chest tightened. She hadn't told him. Not yet. She thought of the child again, of the truth that would one day come like a flood, breaking the fragile walls she built around her empire. And across the lagoon, in a shelter tucked between rusted roofs, David was kneeling on the floor, hammering old wood together, fixing a stranger's broken chair. He had no idea that somewhere, high above the city, the woman who once mocked him now carried his bloodline, hidden beneath pearls and silk. The collision was coming. And when it came, none of their worlds would remain the same. The evening air over Banana Island carried a salt tang from the Atlantic, mingling with the faint perfume of bougainvillea climbing the estate walls. Amanda stepped out of the car in a flowing cream dress, the kind her mother would have chosen for Sunday service. Elegant, modest, whispering wealth without screaming it. The mansion doors opened, spilling warm light and chatter. Jonathan's parents greeted her with wide smiles, a little too polished, their eyes glinting with the hunger that always made her uneasy. They ushered her inside, through rooms glowing with chandeliers, portraits of ancestors glaring down with gold-framed pride. Dinner began with laughter. Silverware chimed, glasses clinked. Talk circled around investments, political favors, land still to be bought. Amanda played her part, offering poised responses, her voice calm as water over stone. Yet beneath the table, her hands twisted the napkin in her lap until her knuckles turned white. Then his mother's voice sliced through the chatter. And when do we expect our first grandchild? The room hushed. Amanda froze, her heart stumbling. Jonathan chuckled, placing his hand on hers. Soon, he said. Very soon. Her throat tightened. She swallowed, forcing a smile, but the room blurred at the edges. Her mind leapt backward, to a rain-drenched night, a narrow alley where David had pressed his coat over her shoulders though he had nothing else to give. His eyes steady, his words soft, and her own foolish lips finding his. The napkin slipped from her hand. She excused herself, walking quickly down the hall, her heels tapping like restless drums. She found the powder room, locked the door, leaned against the marble sink. Her reflection stared back, pearls at her throat, hair perfect, eyes wide with a secret too heavy to bear. How long can you keep this from him? From everyone? She pressed a hand to her stomach. A faint flutter responded, life, small and insistent. When she returned, her mask was back in place. Conversation flowed again, but Amanda felt the walls of her world narrowing. Later, after goodbyes and polite kisses, she stepped into the night air. Jonathan lingered behind, discussing politics with his father. For a moment, Amanda was alone beneath the stars. And then she saw him. Across the street, near the gate, a man leaned against the shadows. His clothes were worn, but his stance carried quiet strength. He turned slightly, and in the dim light, she caught the unmistakable shape of his face. David. Her heart lurched. He didn't move toward her, didn't call her name, just watched, his eyes holding hers for a brief, endless moment, before he turned and vanished into the night. Amanda's breath shook. The secret she thought buried was no longer safe in the dark. The past had found her, and the future, her wedding, her empire, her very identity, was about to unravel. The weeks that followed moved like a dream Amanda could not wake from. Every morning, the household buzzed with preparations, tailors arriving with silk swatches, florists filling the foyer with blossoms that perfumed the air so heavily she could hardly breathe, planners whispering about guest lists that read like a nation's power index. Jonathan was radiant, brimming with charm. We'll be the talk of Lagos, he said often, drawing her close, kissing her forehead as though the world was already theirs. But Amanda carried another world inside her, small and silent, fluttering beneath her ribs. a truth that swelled day by day, impossible to cage. At night, she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, hearing her own heart louder than the crickets outside. She remembered David's eyes in the dark, the way he had looked at her as though she were not a crown or a prize, but simply Amanda. She remembered how his hands, though calloused, had been gentle, how he had once told her, "A woman is not what she owns, but what she gives." On the morning of the wedding, the sky was a bruised gray, heavy with clouds. Amanda sat before the mirror in her bridal suite, draped in ivory lace, jewels woven into her hair. Women fussed around her, pinning, adjusting, praising. But her reflection, pale, trembling, hollow-eyed, was a stranger. Her mother entered, regal in deep blue. She dismissed the attendants, closed the door. For a moment, she studied Amanda in silence. Then, softly, "Child, you don't look like a bride." Amanda's lips parted, but no words came. Tears swelled, sliding down her cheeks, smearing the powder carefully placed an hour before. Her mother knelt, taking her hands. "Tell me what you carry." The words broke free like water through cracked stone. "It isn't his. The baby. It isn't Jonathan's." Silence. The clock ticked. Somewhere beyond the walls, music began to play, the opening strains for guests being seated. Her mother's grip tightened, but her voice remained steady. "Whose is it?" Amanda's throat ached as she whispered, "David's." Her mother closed her eyes, exhaling slowly, as if she had expected this all along. "You must decide now," she said. "Walk into that hall with a lie that will choke you forever, or walk out with the truth, no matter the cost." Amanda's body trembled. She could hear the swell of violins, the murmuring of 100 voices, the weight of a legacy pressing against the doors. But somewhere deeper, beneath fear, beneath shame, a fragile strength stirred. She rose. The ceremony had begun. Jonathan stood tall at the altar, smiling like a man who had already won. The guests rose as Amanda appeared, veiled, every step echoing like thunder in her chest. Halfway down the aisle, she stopped. The murmurs rippled, uneasy. Jonathan frowned, confused. Amanda lifted her veil. Her voice, though shaking, carried through the hall. "I cannot marry you." Gasps. 100 faces turned. Her mother closed her eyes, but nodded, proud. Amanda's words spilled into the stunned silence. She told them of her love for another, of mistakes and nights of weakness, of the child she now carried. She spoke of truth, of dignity, of choosing not wealth or titles, but honesty. And then, like a shift in the air, someone stirred at the back of the hall. There was David, standing quietly, in a worn suit that did little to hide the strength of his frame, his gaze steady even under 100 stares. Amanda's heart lurched toward him. Jonathan's fury burned, his voice rising, but it was drowned by the whispering tide of guests, by the sound of chairs scraping, by the sudden knowledge that the empire he tried to build was collapsing in plain sight. Amanda walked past him, past the altar, past the astonished faces, until she reached David. He did not move at first, as though afraid this was still a dream. But when her hand reached for his fingers closed around hers with trembling certainty. The hall erupted, outrage, disbelief, scandal. But Amanda no longer heard them. The only sound was the beating of her heart, echoed in David's grip. Together, they stepped into the storm outside. Rain had begun to fall, cold and cleansing, soaking lace and silk until they clung to her skin. She lifted her face, laughing through tears, while David held her close. The sky broke open, and so did she. Not with shame, but with freedom. For the first time, Amanda felt like herself again. Not a prize, not an empire, just a woman, standing in the rain, holding the man she loved, and carrying the fragile promise of tomorrow beneath her heart.